Hello, I am very excited and eager to talk to you about the 3 ways to get out of the comparison trap. I was not planning on doing videos today at all, but I thought what better time to do it when I am fresh on the heels of experiencing myself sinking down into that downward spiral of the comparison trap myself. So I know that I'm not alone. I know that every person, especially every woman, knows this experience. And I will be totally honest in saying this is a very historical pattern for me that goes back as long as I can remember, really. I mean, yeah, I mean, it goes back. I was training started very young as a competitive ice dancer. I started competing when I was the age of 5. And so inevitably well, just think of the word competition, and that basically um, implies loads and loads of comparison and ever elusive uh, measuring sticks that were always shifting and changing. And there was, it was just, you could always do better, always do better, be better, look better, perform better. And you were surrounded by always people who were better than you and always people who weren't as good as you in their skill set. And I remember it also creeping into, I have an older brother, and I remember from a very young age already starting to compare myself to his girlfriends who were a bit older than I was and became sort of this, these women that I idolized. And so in any case, my point for you today is let's look at, because we know however it shows up for you, those are just a few of the sneak peeks into what it has looked like for me, and there are many more, which I can go into another time. But however it looks, it's going to look different for all of us. And what we know is that it is a very painful, destructive, depleting, draining, disembodying, self-harming experience and heartbreaking. And that's why I was so passionate to get on here and share, because I don't want anyone to go through that any more than I want myself to spend any more time there than we need to. And so let's go through the 3 tips that I am sharing with you today. Of course, there are plenty more, but I find these are super effective, readily available, and pretty quick. So the first one is exercising fierce boundaries, which requires that we alert ourselves to when that energy of comparison, oftentimes it will mask itself or disguise itself as inspiration. Sometimes that's valid and legitimate, so it's not always a mask or a disguise, but being inspired is a very slippery slope. So be mindful of when you are inspired by someone and when that turns the corner and you start to downward spiral. And in terms of feeling less than, like when inspiration turns to comparison and self-destruction, self-harming, putting yourself down, putting another on a pedestal, looking at what she has that you don't have. And number 1, catch yourself. And right then and there, it's important to exercise fierce boundaries. In this particular instance that I'm fresh on the heels of, I did not catch myself as quickly as I could have. Or I even let myself go beyond that point. I did. And I won't say it was the point what does that say? The point beyond return, because I returned myself, and that's why I'm here talking about it. So you catch yourself as soon as you can. Exercise fierce boundaries. Disengage from whatever that source of stimulus or inspiration or feedback or information was. Disengage from it, walk away, turn it off, shut it down. That is your sacred boundary. If you want to learn more about the sacred boundaries, I talk about it in my new free gift that you are all receiving, the Feminine Soul Fulfillment Formula. I talk about sacred boundaries there. Very important, especially in avoiding the comparison trap. I'll put a link to that free gift below this video. So you disengage. Step 2. And that's, I say fierce because it does, once we get onto that momentum, it is very addictive, which is why I didn't exercise my boundaries as quickly as I know I could have. It's addictive, and I'll tell you why, because the whole energy of comparison itself is based on the feeling that we're not enough as we are, and that we are looking to what another is exemplifying or embodying or experiencing as a means to figure out what we need to do, who we need to become, how we need to look, what size, shape we need to be, what we need to wear or say, any element of the human expression. We are looking outside of ourselves for, how do I say, the barometer. I lost my train of, I can't find the word, but you get the idea. We're looking for what it is that we are not already in another, to learn what that is, to hopefully become good enough. That's essentially that's really at the heart of comparison. And so if we are steeped in those feelings of not enoughness and unworthiness and lack, there's going to be a real compelling urgency to figuring out what it is we need to be good enough. And so that's why I say it's addictive. It has a very strong, very vicious momentum. And so part 2, we need to recognize, have forgiveness and have compassion with ourselves for being on that hunt for, we're trying to make ourselves feel better. But deep inside, there's a real hole that we are trying to fill we're barking up the wrong tree. So that's what step 2 is it's really come back home to your own body first and foremost, because comparison has us so up and out, so disembodied, dissociated, disconnected. We have completely not only abandoned ourselves, but completely rejected ourselves altogether. So step 2, once you exercise that fierce boundary, is to come back home to yourself all the way into your body. Breathe and feel yourself in this moment, and really take a few breaths to land, ground, feel your feet on the floor, press, hands on the legs. Just come back to some tactile sense of, okay, it is safe to be here in myself, with myself right now. And then once you're back home, third step is, once we've got that context of where we have been and why we have been there, from a place of kindness, compassion, forgiveness, acceptance. We are being soft and loving and tender with that part of us that is desperately seeking to be good enough to get that love, approval, validation, acceptance that she, on some level, doesn't feel she's worthy of. So part 3 is engage in a dialogue, open up that connection with that self inside, with that part of you that is crying out for attention, essentially. And you ask, what am I feeling? It might take a few breaths, a moment or two, to really let the truth of what you're feeling bubble up. So that requires space, presence, attention, and listening and patience. And then based on what feeling arises, it's what is it? What do I need? What do I need? And again, give it space, time, attention to reveal itself based on the feelings that are there. There's going to be most likely a need on the other side of discovering that feeling. And then the last piece I'll say is really, how are you going to honor that? So it is going to be some form of, most likely, for me, it's often that need is often something in the flavor of feeding myself, filling myself back up, continuing that process of coming deeper and deeper home inside myself. Because when we have started fallen into that comparison trap, we are completely decimating ourselves, emptying ourselves out, draining out any fuel, any gasoline we've had in our tank. So I would invite you to just look at around what the feeling and the need is, how, in addition or in honor of that, how can you now focus on feeding yourself, filling yourself back up, and really nurturing your essence. Get curious about what would fill you up, what would feel good to you, what is the most loving, the most fiercely loving action or way of being that you can now move into. And speaking of fierce love, that's another module I talk about in my free gift, the Feminine Soul Fulfillment Formula. So again, I will put that link below regarding the sacred boundaries, regarding fierce self-love. They will absolutely support and enhance this practice of intercepting and recovering from the comparison trap, because we will inevitably get sucked into it from time to time in varying degrees. So this is your rescue remedy for those times. All right. I hope that, let me know how that goes. Feel free to post your questions, reach out, reply to this email, comment below. This video will show up in my blog, in a newsletter, on Facebook. So however you want to reach out, get support. This is a topic I am so passionate about, I am so familiar with, and I am absolutely passionate and devoted to minimizing the degree to which I suffer and you suffer any longer than we need to in that experience.